All right, as we were discussing, in fact, we took the entire program yesterday. Don't do that very often, but this is such an important issue, the National Defense Authorization Act. It is the measure that directs the funding and therefore the policy of our military. Well, last week, the House of Representatives passed the strongest version of the National Defense Authorization Act that I've seen in years, which essentially returns the military from the wokeness that we've seen invade in the last couple of years back to its core mission, to be prepared to fight and win America's wars if necessary. Now, the Biden administration has intentionally turned our military into a laboratory for woke social experimentation that distracts from the military's core mission. Now, debate has begun in the Senate regarding their version of the NDAA. Join me now to give us an update and expectations in the Senate chamber is Utah Senator Mike Lee. He serves on 4 committees, including the Senate Budget Committee and the Joint Economic Committee. Senator Lee, welcome back to Washington Watch. Great to see you.
Great to see you, Tony. Thank you.
So the Senate began debate on the NDAA yesterday, taking on amendments. Give us the latest of where things stand.
Well, we started processing amendments. We started casting votes. We just finished casting a vote moments ago. Senator Rand Paul had an amendment that simply asked us to clarify that the NATO treaty, Article 5 of the NATO treaty, can't take us to war. It can't declare war. It can't be interpreted to supersede Congress's obligation, Congress's power to decide whether to declare war. Sadly, that one went down. Only 16 Republicans voted for it. All Democrats and the remainder of the Republicans voted against it.
Wow.
We're processing other amendments today, tomorrow, and into next week.
So let's get your thoughts on the House version of the National Defense Authorization Act.
Yeah, so the House version of the National Defense Authorization Act is terrific. It's not a perfect document, as pretty much no bill is, but it achieves some major gains. One of the more significant gains, one of the gains that I'm most pleased about, is the fact that they passed language in the form of an amendment that was still part of the bill when they passed it, that ends the Department of Defense policy violating at least the spirit, if not also the letter, of 10 U.S.C. Section 1093, which prohibits the use of U.S. military funds, Department of Defense funds, for abortions. And we've got this policy right now in which the Department of Defense is being too cute by half and trying to skirt that law by saying that they're going to pay for abortion-related travel and leave time. If someone in the military wants to get an abortion in a neighboring state, all they have to do is indicate as much, and they can receive 3 weeks of paid leave time and have all their travel expenses reimbursed by the United States government. This isn't right, and the House version of the NDAA undoes that.
That was never the case before. That's never happened before.
No, it's never happened before, in part because people who ran the Pentagon were appropriately focused on fighting wars and protecting America's national security, not on a woke agenda.
But wouldn't you also say that they abided by the law? I mean, you
Yes.
made reference to the section of law that restricts the expenditure of government funds to facilitate abortion.
See, when you're focused on America's national security, you're also going to abide by the law rather than looking for ways to flout the law, to skirt the law, which is exactly what they're doing with this barbaric policy. So I applaud the House of Representatives for sticking to its guns and for taking that authority away.
So
I hope we can keep it in the bill.
What's the way forward in making sure that is in the final version of the NDAA?
Here's the funny thing, Tony. So the version of the NDAA that we're considering in the Senate this week is completely different than the House version of the bill. I'm not sure why we're doing it that way. That's the way Chuck Schumer decided to bring it up. Ordinarily, if the House had already acted, I would think we should start with the House version, but we're not doing it that way. What's going to happen now is that the Senate will work on its version of the bill, and once it's done, then it will probably go to a conference committee where there are conferees, as they're called, key members of both chambers appointed to serve on a committee that decide which provisions passed by the House and which provisions passed by the Senate will become part of the final negotiated deal.
So as you just described this amendment by Senator Paul that did not pass, and the threshold I've seen thus far for the amendments has been 60 votes, it's unlikely that if the Senate tries to push these same types of votes, Republicans, that they would pass. So would it not be the best approach to have Senate Republicans stand with what the House did and let them slug this out in conference?
Yes, that's my view, and I believe that's the view of the overwhelming majority of my Republican colleagues in the Senate, which is there's a huge win in the House. Knowing that the Democrats control the Senate, they have a majority in the Senate, it would be dangerous and counterproductive for us to take up that same amendment here, knowing that it is likely to fail. And it's likely to fail whether they set the vote at a simple majority threshold or at a 60-vote threshold. Either way, the Democrats are going to have enough votes in order to defeat it. It's better to go into the conference committee posture in a situation where the House has passed something but the Senate hasn't taken it up than it is to go into it under the posture that the House has passed something and the Senate has voted it down. Yeah. And so that's why it's unlikely to come up in the Senate version at this stage of the consideration.
Senator Lee, anything that our listeners and viewers should be doing right now, very quickly, we're up against a break, but anything we should be doing?
Viewers should be making sure that they support Senator Tuberville and that they call their home state senators and encourage their home state senators to support the heroic stand taken by my friend and colleague, Senator Tommy Tuberville, who has been standing up for the law, who's been standing up for unborn human life, and taking a position that's drawn him a lot of criticism, including, sadly, some criticism from among Senate Republicans, friendly fire that doesn't feel so friendly.
Senator, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tony.